My initial suggestions for Assessment 2 Part B for the Learning to Teach Online Mooc that we're currently doing were theoretical. I currently work in a capacity of supporting teaching and learning as an instructional designer and knowledge advocate. Since Assessment 2 for this Mooc, I've been asked to support a completely new unit in the field of advertising. There is no original unit that we're working from in this example. This unit is blended in this iteration, but will be offered again as fully online in 2015. Therefore, both modes of delivery need to be taken into account at this stage of its development. The unit's convener has asked for my assistance in using web-based tools to support his teaching and his students' learning over a 7-week period. The unit will cover corporate social responsibility, does a brand have a conscience, using fear and anxiety in advertising, political advertising, cultural factors in advertising, the ethics and context of advertising, and the ethical issues in new and emerging media. Throughout these weeks, we will use small, formative exercises and assessments leading to a summative group project, which is expected to be created collaboratively by the students using online tools to enable and exhibit their learning. Our objectives are to teach the students how to research, curate, collate, and collaborate with information supporting the week's topics online, bringing them all together for their final assessment, which also involves the delivery of an online presentation to the group via Blackboard, Collaborate, or in person. This is yet to be decided. Given these objectives, I suggested what I deemed to be the most appropriate tools for the 4 areas I mentioned earlier. For research purposes, I thought that setting up RSS feeds would be a good way to start the information gathering process. Using an RSS reader such as Feedly, which you can see now on the screen, would enable the sorting of topics and publications, plus it would also provide students with the most current and relevant information in a timely manner. RSS feeds change regularly depending on the source. For example, if an online journal updates weekly, Feedly would deliver the titles and brief outlines of each article for students to peruse at their discretion. They wouldn't have to read everything, but can be presented with information from their feeds in small, manageable chunks to digest easily without feeling overwhelmed, which you can see on the screen right now. For example, here are my topics on the left-hand side of the screen. This one is about e-learning in general. The ones that are featured at the top are the ones that are the most popular at this moment in time. And then that gives you today's feeds further down. And I can click here on any particular one and it will give me a little synopsis of the article that I'm about to see if I decide to go ahead and read it in full text view. I've also conducted some research in this area in the past, and this article in particular attracted my attention. It's called The Unexpected Connection, Serendipity and Human Mediation in Networked Learning by Rita Kopp, and it was published in 2012. And she discusses how the importance of RSS feeds and how they're used in education as well, and how they are effective, and potential downfalls as well as positive aspects of using RSS feeds in education. Curation and collation of the information can also be achieved by the students in a variety of ways, which is another tool I have suggested here. You can see here that I'm looking at something called Scoop It. Okay, this is one that I use regularly, and you can see here that I've organised information into selected topics. The one you're seeing right now is my topic, Instructional Design and Social Media, here across the top. And in this topic, you'll see that I'm collected articles about various aspects of instructional design and social media here. And sometimes I even provide commentary about what I've read, in case somebody decides to follow that topic and decides to follow me on social media. They can see the kind of things I'm interested in. I have curated these topics for professional development purposes and information sharing, but they have the potential to be used in education as well. Further to this, another tool sprang to mind, particularly in relation to these advertising students, and that is Flipboard. Because they're advertising students that we're dealing with, we thought it best to select Flipboard in this instance, as it has a magazine-like feel about the interface and would ultimately be more impressive if embedded into an e-portfolio generated by the student at a later stage in the degree. They'd have to think later in the degree about how they will present their work to others for job seeking and information sharing with colleagues in the workforce. So it was also suggested that perhaps depending on the comfort levels of the students in using these tools, perhaps Scoop It could be used more for curation, and when reviewed and critically examined by the students, it could be collated into a clean, attention-grabbing way in Flipboard, as you can see here in the example on the screen. Time will tell if this is an unnecessary extra step, or if it works as a good staging area for further consideration and critical thinking to go on by the students that we use in our embryonic stages. Okay, but further to that, I've also done research in this context, and I've found some great articles about Web 2.0 and embedding tools, curation tools, not only RSS feeds but curation tools such as Flipboard and Scoop It, as well as blogs, which I'm not going to go into further detail about. But there is some research out there, and this is a good example as well, called Learning in Web 2.0 Environments, Surface Learning, Chaos or Deep Learning and Self-Regulation. This was published in 2011. I'm sure there are more things published since, but this is particularly, I thought, a good article in the sense that it gave you a lot of examples and statistics from the Texas University and Florida State University. Now we come to Twitter. This is me, excuse my picture. As for the collaboration, it was decided that Twitter could most effectively occur via this tool, as well as Google+, which I will cover shortly. A hashtag for the unit would be created for the students either by using either of these tools, and they could be simultaneously used as well. So I could go to another kind of tool such as Hootsuite or TweetDeck to actually push whatever I tweet out to the world in general via Twitter, as well as via Google+, LinkedIn, etc. That can be done simultaneously. However, for the purpose of the unit that we are developing, we thought that we'd just stick with Twitter and Google+. You'll see that also the asset of Twitter is that in Blackboard it can be embedded quite easily into Blackboard. As you can see here, this is just a sandpit area that we created for the teachers where I work, and basically they can see my Twitter stream here embedded into Blackboard, and they can also see another stream embedded that is around the hashtag e-learning here. If students are hesitating, for example, with signing up for these tools, as you might have with, let's say, more mature students or students who've never used Twitter before, they can monitor the Twitter streams easily in Blackboard, and they can avoid falling behind the rest of the group if that's the case that they don't wish to sign up for Twitter. You'll also see that I have used, just quickly before I move on, I have used Scoop It as well. That can be embedded here. That you can see that topic that I discussed earlier is embedded here, as well as another colleague's topic. And this can actually, if you watch the screen, it actually changes while you're sitting there watching a screen. So you can make like a little sort of flash through of all the topics you've been curating recently. The hashtag can also be used in other social tools like Google+ and Facebook as well, hence the simultaneous streaming. But if we go to Google+, this is particularly what I am focusing on for the unit with the lecturer. We are interested in using something called Google Hangouts. Google can also provide an avenue for the students to hang out with one another, chatting via webcam and text if they wish to meet virtually to work on their final group assignment. Also, when the unit goes fully online next year, this tool can be used by the lecturer to set up live Q&A sessions, question and answer sessions for the students to fill in any gaps in their knowledge. These hangouts can be recorded and posted on the LMS as well. In our case, it's Blackboard at my institution. in the event that not all students are able to attend again. It has a benefit over Blackboard Collaborate in that it has a picture-in-picture feature. I don't know if you'll be able to see that on this screen, but yes, you can right here. So you see here that in this particular example, Hangouts on Air, you'll see the main screen here, and you'll see all the participants in the bottom right-hand corner. Okay, so students will be able to see who is participating here in the corner, and whoever takes the microphone will appear here in the center of the screen. It's an environment that provides students with a more engaging experience, I think, and they would feel as though they were actually talking to someone rather than merely reading text on a screen all the time. So it gives you a face-to-face interaction component in the unit, if you will. The other thing that inspired me here in the sense was in the Mooc that we're doing at the moment, this particular video in Module 4 that was given interview by Lubna Alam about Twitter blogs and wikis video. I found this particularly inspiring because she's an example of how she's using Twitter streams and other Web 2.0 technologies in her instruction at the University of Canberra, I believe she was from. Okay, if I go back to Microsoft Word just to show you our learning outcomes. The learning outcomes of this unit are as follows on screen. We discuss how students must discuss how regulations, ethical considerations and cultural differences affect the practice of advertising. And they must be able to explain both the responsibilities of the advertising industry and the ethical requirements and mechanisms of public complaint and control. They must be able to describe how advertising campaigns are culturally defined, and they must be able to apply intercultural and ethical theory to practical issues. It's because of these learning outcomes that the aforementioned tools have been selected. They're not designed to be used one at a time in a separate and segregated manner. My way of thinking is that they have a fluid, online nature about them, and I envision that the cycle between the four components of research, curation, collation and collaboration would be constantly evolving over the weeks of study, generating a habit between the students and the instructors of constant engagement. These tools lend themselves well to the literature around using BYOD, which is an acronym we use for Bring Your Own Devices, to learning. If used successfully, they can enable an anytime, anywhere learning environment. So students can learn on their mobiles, on their laptops, on their tablets, on their computers. Now we're getting to smartwatches, so they could possibly even learn there. And I think that reinforces the idea of chunking information in e-learning. Students would not even feel that they're performing the assessment tasks expected of them in the unit. Rather, they would hopefully see the whole process as enjoyable and highly interactive. Discussion would be enabled then in the Twitter and Google+ Hangout environments, addressing the first learning outcome listed here. If I go back to my browser, you can see here that this is an example of a hashtag that we've used for one of our units at the institution I work for. And, well, we've got 2 new results since I logged in. Basically, these are all students that you're seeing on the screen that are interacting with each other about a topic, not the unit I'm talking about in this video, but another topic within our university for a teacher, and they're discussing and collecting information here together, all using the ENT310 hashtag. The other thing that you can also use in a lecture and face-to-face situation is something called Twitter for, which is showing on the screen now around that same hashtag we just looked at. In this example, a portion of the lecturer's screen could be devoted to this Twitter for, which is a great way to keep the students engaged in the presentation and discussion, and it kind of forms a back channel around the topic. So while you are presenting as a lecturer or in a toot, you can actually talk about things that they can contribute in the background as well while you're talking. Furthermore, there is something that is called Tweet Chat, which is tweetchat.com, which I don't have an example of on the screen at the moment. But basically, Tweet Chat enables you to put in a hashtag that you've prescribed for a session, a live session, and a specific time each week could be scheduled for a tweet chat around this hashtag to discuss how, in this case for advertising, regulations, ethical considerations and cultural differences can affect the practice of it. So the live nature of such a rapid chat atmosphere could work quite well in the generation of ideas and discussing differences in a non-confronting and respectful environment. I've found in the past as a Mooc participator that tweet chat works quite well in that regard, and the rapidity, even though it can be a little bit overwhelming at first, actually lends itself more to the ideas just free-flowing and forthcoming in a very easy and efficient way, and it can all be kept later for reference so that you can follow any links that any of the participants put up in that rapid fire, let's say half-hour tweet chat that you schedule every week in your lectures. Going back to Flipboard, Flipboard is actually, you'll find that students can further build upon the cyclical nature of using these tools to collate and curate their findings, applying intercultural and ethical theory to practical issues and presenting them in an appealing format, in this case fit for the advertising industry, by using Flipboard as part of their final group presentation. That's what we thought in terms of using Flipboard. And it can be a shared repository for the purposes of this group project or an individual one based on the needs and desires of the students and the lecturer. As for Feedly, again, the Feedly tool, this is a topic that I've curated for education. The Feedly tool can assist greatly in meeting the criteria around explaining both the responsibilities of the advertising industry and the unit we're developing, and the ethical requirements and mechanisms of public complaint and control. Again addressing those learning outcomes I showed you earlier. Information and RSS feeds could be gathered into this Feedly that are pertinent in addressing this learning outcome, provided that some assistance around information literacy could also be provided by the lecturer and the unit's liaison librarian in a virtual class or tutorial session. This is good for particularly for blended learning, but it can also be applied in online completely. As a former librarian, I used to give virtual classes in information literacy as well, via Blackboard Collaborate at our institution. The gathering information in this tool in Feedly could also address their learnt understanding of how advertising campaigns are culturally defined, providing them with the ultimate ability to describe these in more detail based on the research conducted and constructed with Feedly. This would then be further reinforced by their lecturer and fellow students in the ongoing opportunities to collaborate with one another. Speaking of communities, this is my personal login on Google+. I'm a member of all these communities that you see on the screen. Yes, I am into big data, as you can see. The ongoing and final assessment for the unit that we're preparing for advertising, though, could take place in two ways. Students could be peer assessed within their groups, as well as being monitored and provided with feedback from their lecturer via Google+. Via those hangouts we covered earlier. But all of these chunks, and that's why I'm showing you this page of communities, is because you can see how everything we do via these tools is chunked. Okay, all of these chunks could come together nicely with a final summary or an analysis describing and analysing what they learnt through their process with the guidance of their teacher. And it could also have an advertising brief approach, let's say in this instance, further preparing them to embark in this industry sector's workforce, and their teamwork skills and their ability to work independently can be assessed by their progress throughout the unit. Plus their analysis, problem solving and communication skills would be apparent in the work they produce and in the contributions they make to the group. Embracing the use of these tools would illustrate their willingness and ability to tackle unfamiliar problems along with their research throughout the unit for their final group assessment. I think lastly, this is, I work for Swinburne University, as you might have already guessed. This is our wiki for the staff, okay, that as a learning technologist and knowledge advocate, I am assisting in this unit in learning transformations, and also with this unit in advertising that we're proposing. And it would be my responsibility to train the lecturers and students in the use of these tools that I've just covered in this video. I've created a social media policy and indemnity form for the students to digitally sign with our legal department so that our institution is covered legally, and unforeseen or unexpected issues can hopefully be dealt with swiftly if needed. A minimum cost to use the full potential of the tools I've covered could be incurred by the staff if they're permitted to do so to ensure delivery of high quality course. But however, all of these tools are available for free, and if such a cost is not permitted in the first iteration by our institution, it might be subject to a trial of to see if we could make it work in a newly developed fully online unit. The teaching staff have to be trained at first, which is why I'm showing you this wiki page, and so that they are comfortable with the technology in advance of dealing with any problems the students might encounter. However, I would always be on hand if the staff needed assistance in this regard as well. Because of the pilot nature of this course, we've tried to cover all bases, but time will tell if something else needs to be added to the mix for future completely online iterations. Research papers obviously will be written as a result of this pilot program, and it has received seed funding, as it is the first of many steps in this area of study, I'm sure, in advertising. The short-term outcomes for this unit are to see how well the incorporation of online tools work in a blended environment. So you can see if I click here on, just before I go on, if I click here on the Twitter page, you'll see that I've created resources, how to create a Twitter account, etc. for the teachers. Okay, I've also selected some video resources from YouTube as well as other areas so that teachers can feel comfortable about seeing Twitter in use on screen first. All of these are supposed to reinforce the teachers, and that's my role here at Swinburne, is to do that. But this would be adapted to suit students as well, because just because a big group of students might be Generation Y or younger doesn't mean that they are digitally literate. So I would envision that we would need to support any kind of online learning unit with a lot of these kind of accessible documents within Blackboard to actually teach them how to use the tools first as well, and the appropriate way to use them so that we don't violate any legal avenues. I'm sure that the lecturers will assess how well the pedagogical side of things around the subject materials went, but these are short term. So as we are viewing it as a trial run in the second stage of this unit semester, our findings of our work in the last part of 2014 will help our long-term outcomes, which is to deliver this unit completely online. Success is the goal, and how it is measured will be up to the lecturers and convener of the unit. However, it is envisioned that as the learning designer and advisor, I will also be asked for input and feedback in this regard. As to the effectiveness of the new unit, we are in the midst of preparing pre- and post-online surveys of the students to ensure free commentary without inhibition and something solid for further analysis. Also, I'm in the process of setting up learning analytics surrounding the tools, particularly for the online version of this unit in 2015. Perhaps, if time allows, some analytics could occur in the pilot blended version of this unit also. However, due to time constrictions at the moment, these may be extremely simple in nature compared to what I would create in advance of 2015. So I'm hoping I've addressed all the requirements for this assessment, and I look forward to any feedback I receive in the peer review. Thank you.